Uh, Happy New Year, folks. Welcome to MedVR's series on medical XR. Today, we're really excited that we have the Veterans Health Administration here to talk about their immersive journey from 1 to 160 XR users and research sites within the VA. It's not an insignificant sized organization, and I don't think there's another case in the world of XR at this scale. MedVR is a medical XR accelerator and boot camp. This year, we'll be opening a bricks and mortar operation in the Longwood Medical section of Boston. The purpose being to both train and bring together people from the technology community and the healthcare community. And the necessity of having the domain experts of healthcare available. We really need to be right next to the hospitals, and we're 10 minutes from probably 2/3 of the hospitals in Boston from locating there. I'm pleased to introduce our moderator, Dr. Susan Persky. We'd like to find moderators who are also domain experts in the field because it makes the talks that much better. Dr. Persky is an associate investigator and head of the Health Communications and Behavior Unit at NIH. She also directs the Immersive Simulation Program within the Social and Behavioral Research branch of the National Human Genome Research Institute and National Institute of Health. She has been working in this field since her postdoc research, and has built an immersive virtual reality-based experimental research lab, which was founded in 2006, working in the field. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Susan, and we'll get started with the talk.
Great, thank you very much. So it is my absolute pleasure to be here today to moderate for you. And also to introduce two of the biggest luminaries really in healthcare and medical XR. Personally, I have been incredibly impressed by what our speakers today have managed to achieve. Their work really sets the Veterans Health Administration apart as the leader in immersive healthcare implementation, as Steve said, at an unrivaled scale. So our first speaker is Dr. Ann Lord-Bailey. She is the Director for Clinical Tech Innovation for the VHA Innovation Ecosystem. She is also the Immersive Technology Lead for the VHA's Office of Healthcare Innovation and Learning. Dr. Bailey started her healthcare journey as a pharmacy resident and pharmacy practitioner for the Western North Carolina VA. In 2020, she joined the VHA Innovation Ecosystem team to lead the implementation of emerging tech, and in 2021 became the OHIL's lead for immersive technology, establishing the VA Immersive as a collaborative program across the office. Our second speaker, Caitlin Rawlins, has been a nurse for over 10 years with the VA since 2017, and has initiated when she initiated the first positive distraction-focused VR program for pain and anxiety management in the VA. So now she aids leading the VHA Innovation as Deputy Director of Clinical Tech Innovation for the VHA Innovation Ecosystem. And she also co-leads the VHA Extended Reality Network. They are very accomplished on their own and are quite the dynamic duo. In 2022 alone, they were both awarded their own G2 Exchange Awards, and along with other team members, Service to the Citizen Award. On top of that, they were recently awarded the International Virtual Reality Healthcare Association's Hero Award for dedication to the growth of immersive tech in healthcare. They work with experts, thought leaders in government, academia, industry, frontline staff, as they lead the expansion of XR tech from really just a few facilities not all that long ago to now engaging over 1,300 VA employees. So this is the journey that they're going to present for you today, and please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Thank you so much, Susan. Always good to see you. So speaking to exactly what you just said about our growth and kind of what that journey looked like, the first part of our presentation that I'm going to present to you is what that growth looks like literally on a map. So we'll go on to the next slide there. So starting in 2016, adoption of XR across the VA was still relatively small. So you can see on this slide, there were 4 sites, all primarily looking at imaginal prolonged exposure therapy, that being the only use case being looked at really in 2016. And then as that started to grow, in 2017 is when I really started engaging in XR as well. And so you'll see that on the next map where I joined that slide. But so initial engagement was really just like 8 to 10 staff, about 5 VA facilities. 1 community of practice started forming after I joined that group, looking into XR in 2017, as you see here on this slide. So then in 2019, when that community of practice started ramping up, more sites started getting engaged. And that was really after I presented at the innovation experience, the VHA innovation experience in 2019, and started to find some like-minded individuals. And we started communicating in that community of practice around lessons learned, barriers that we were coming across, sharing clinical resources in terms of actually integrating this type of technology into healthcare. And it really started to blossom from there. So what began as just these few sites really engaging in that work in 2019, now in 2022, is an incredibly large group of people across the entire Veterans Health Administration looking into and utilizing XR in numerous different ways. And as part of this process was the development of the VHA XR network. So what started just as a community of practice is now an entire network of VA employees across the VA engaging with immersive technology. So you can see on this slide that engagement has now increased from about 8 people to now over 1,360 frontline staff and leaders across the VHA. We now have immersive technology in over 160 VA facilities in every state, including Puerto Rico, which is really exciting. We now have 3 communities of practice, one that's focused on kind of general XR use and is generally the best attended, and it really is a place for our actual clinicians and staff members to share their experience in actually utilizing immersive technology. And then we also have 2 other communities of practice, one focused on virtual reality and mental health, and another on employee wellness and burnout prevention and how that works with immersive technology. So both of those are growing as well, with thoughts on a 4th one coming soon. As part of the actual clinical integration of technology, any of the pilots that we have going on in the VA, we do set up office hours for those as a space for those clinicians to come and ask questions, share barriers that they're encountering and really helping them and supporting them during that clinical integration process, which I'll talk more about later too. We also have a bi-monthly happy hour for just general XR conversations, as well as coming up this year, we are developing content for what will be an XR 101 course that our staff can actually take to learn more about what is XR, how are we using it, what are the general precautions and contraindications, safety guidelines, infection control procedures, to really, kind of get their foot in the door and kind of share that knowledge more broadly. And that will also be for continuing education credit as well. So we're very excited to be able to start offering that. And then on the next slide, so this is just an example of some of the areas of focus that we're already seeing within the Veterans Health Administration. And as I said, this is a sample. So there are currently over 30 identified use cases across the VHA, and that seemingly increases weekly. The most prominent use case at the very beginning was and kind of remains pain, along with that exposure therapy that I mentioned, both acute and chronic pain. But the other areas of focus are really starting to grow rapidly, and that's thanks to various collaborations, donations, program office supported procurements, and development projects across the entire Veterans Health Administration.
Yeah, so just as Caitlin was talking about, and you're able to see that growth, I think one of the things that has been really foundational and critical for us across the board to see this kind of growth has been the collaborative community approach. So the difference in what was happening in 2015 and 2016 with imaginal prolonged exposure and some of those single site efforts versus what happened after Caitlin started her project in 2017 was the growth of a community and working together. So it came initially as a groundswell from the field. So many of you may be able to resonate with that, but what we wanted to know and make most important was what was the perspective, the need, and what were we trying to solve for the end user, whether that was our veteran patients or our staff or leadership. And the thing that we have found is it takes this entire ecosystem of work, including many of you, to pull these types of things off. So one of the things we did was begin to collaborate with industry and other government agencies. It's so much fun here to be here today with Dr. Persky, who's become a great friend and also colleague in these efforts forward. So some of the things we started to do, collaborative research and development agreements. We currently have 5 different collaborations ongoing at 27 different VA sites. So just to give you perspective, we have over 170 medical centers across the VA in total. So 27 of those are involved in these collaborations. In those collaborations, we're looking at 17 different use cases. And with the real goal, if we boil it down, oversimplify what we're trying to accomplish, it is, what is the veteran feedback? Do they like it? Do they find this helpful in their healthcare journey? And then clinicians as well. We want to know, do they see this working into their workflow? What needs to change about it? Where does it fit? Where does it not fit? Do we need to change how we think about how we deliver care in order to implement some of this newer technology? And then moving forward, how do we do this co-design and co-development work? We've also worked with, Caitlin mentioned this as well, nonprofit organizations. One in particular, Soldier Strong, has worked really closely with VA to get more headsets across our entire organization. Imaginal prolonged exposure, that's been mentioned a few times. That's Brave Mind is the one we have now at 21 different VA medical centers, thanks to Soldier Strong enabling that donation and then training our staff. We found that Brave Mind in particular is best fitted where we have veterans who maybe nothing else has worked for them, but also clinicians who are already trained in imaginal prolonged exposure and interested in VR. We found that adding Brave Mind to that combination really helps amplify care and change the way our veterans are experiencing that care. And then also Penumbra's Y series was donated across 56 units were donated across 18 different medical centers. And this enabled our staff to put the headsets on, to put on the sensors, to try it, and then to think about how in that care process in any given day, how we might implement some virtual reality experiences. We also began to partner and work with program offices. So one of the ways, I know many of you in the healthcare systems may not have the same type of setup because VA is so large, but there may be other pockets or departments or services in your office that you could begin to think about. But for us, those are program offices. So at the national level in VA central office, there are offices that focus on particular areas of care delivery, reimbursement, access, all these different things. And we began to partner with those offices to implement virtual reality to solve problems that they were experiencing. So Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation Service came to us in 2021 and said, we have some funding, and normally we do a creative arts festival. We can't do in-person events like we have been doing previously, and you all can imagine why. So can we use VR to help engage our creative arts patients and our recreation therapists? And our answer, of course, is yes, we'll figure that out. So we worked with Physical Medicine Rehabilitation Service, did some market research, ended up working with the company with Waya Health to get across now 73 different medical centers have a virtual reality platform for creative arts therapy. And this allows veterans to actually engage with creative arts across medical centers and with each other. But it's also been an exciting process to see that develop and become more specific to the veteran population. With the Veterans Experience Office, they focus on exactly what it sounds like. They take veteran feedback on the healthcare experience and then find ways for us as VA to improve that veteran experience. One of the things that they recognized was, and I hear this in other healthcare systems as well, the challenge of the patient experience at inpatient discharge. And so the question was, can we use virtual reality to help improve that experience? And we're actively piloting this. Now we've piloted our first medical center and about to expand to 11 more medical centers to really continue to get that end user feedback and personalize that content to VA and veterans. With the Office of Pain Management, there was a funding opportunity to address pain management in patients. How can we continue to augment our clinicians and improve and extend our care beyond just the medical center? Many of you are familiar with Applied BR's Reliever, the FDA authorized platform. So we've worked with the Office of Pain Management to fund an 18-site pilot to evaluate not only pain management in VR in general, but specifically chronic pain management and that management at home. And then we've partnered with Office of Mental Health and Suicide Prevention on 2 different projects. One, we know that for suicide prevention, lethal means safety counseling is really important. How do you safely disarm and store weapons? And it's challenging to learn those kinds of things in a 2D format. It's also, for a host of reasons, not well received to require staff to go to gun ranges or to meet with police officers to actually handle weapons. There's a lot of reasons that that's not the best idea. So the middle ground is, in virtual reality, using hand controllers, can we put staff, this one's for staff, can we put staff through experiences where they're learning how to safely arm, disarm, store weapons? Some of the feedback that we've heard for this that I think is particularly interesting is the number of people who weren't familiar with how you actually use a gun lock. So things like that, we're learning really quickly. We're able to address in virtual reality. Another, we're working with Penumbra to develop some pain and suicide prevention content specific to VA and veterans, again, with Office of Mental Health and Suicide Prevention.
Yeah, so throughout this process of developing, piloting, diffusing ideas across the Veterans Health Administration, we've really started to recognize some lessons learned as well as current needs when it comes to actual clinical integration and use of XR technology in healthcare. So clinicians come to us all the time with requests like, I need documentation templates, outcome data, research, products, prices, implementation guides, infection control, et cetera. They're typically initially overwhelmed, as can be expected, with information that kind of seems all over the place. So they really just need a way to pull that all together. And that's really where the XR network and what we're doing with VA Immersive can really step in and kind of step up to the plate. So one of the first lessons I wanted to share was just engage champions. They're essential to successful clinical implementation, whether that's veteran facing or clinician facing, caregiver facing. And the majority of growth, as Anne mentioned, has happened because the clinicians want it. They're excited about it. It isn't just being pushed on them by leadership. And these individuals' needs need to be involved from the very beginning in any pilot or implementation across the board. Another is clinician education and level of comfort. So we've also learned that using this technology, they really need to be educated and trained how to use it and must be given time to really become comfortable with it. So the age range and tech literacy of even our healthcare staff is really vast. So our considerations must also be really vast. Another is SOPs and infection control. So this is healthcare. You know, so having set procedures for use and cleaning are very like the name of the game. So we have to have processes for cleaning. We need devices that are healthcare safe, you know, non-porous surfaces, easy to clean, more manufacturer specific instructions for cleaning created through a healthcare lens. And in that category, we also need to develop processes for actually sending devices home with patients, secure procedures for doing so, hardware, data. There's a lot of needs there. And then documentation. So also related to healthcare, you know, if you didn't document it, then it wasn't done. You know, we know that. So we're also working to develop standardized documentation templates, identifying standardized metrics, So looking at that as we're developing all these pilots, what can we do and what can we use in between various pilots to create these resources to make it easier to integrate, easier to document, and therefore easier to use the data collected in actual healthcare decisions, really embedding this in the way that we do things. Wi-Fi woes is on there because it's the federal government, and this is a big one in the VA. So we're very forward thinking, but we also have a heck of a firewall to deal with. So still working on easy processes for really connecting devices with the VA network and making sure that we're able to use the full extent of capabilities, you know, when Wi-Fi may be poor or non-existent. And even with sending home with patients, what does that look like for our rural patients, rural veterans, and how do we make sure that we aren't creating inequities, the next category. So how do we avoid creating those inequities due to lack or poor Wi-Fi in facilities in patient homes, rural low-income patients? How do we ensure content and hardware is appropriate and effective for multiple patient ages, genders, cultural backgrounds? Which brings us to another one, was security needs and privacy. So making sure that we're able to utilize the full capabilities of what industry has been creating in collaboration with actual healthcare entities. We need to continue working with information technology, security, privacy, logistics to create those pathways alongside industry and academia so that we can really be transparent about our needs and really build out the solutions necessary to best integrate this technology. And as Anne talked about a moment ago about collaboration, that's another huge piece. So continuing to build out these collaborations with all of the various stakeholders to solve these problems, as well as helping to build that business case for XR and healthcare together. So on the next slide, you know, as part of implementation in the VA, creating resources is a huge piece of that. So as I said, you need engaged champions, but you also need to be able to get those champions comfortable and educated about how XR can be used and the way it is being used and the best way to go forward with that. So we've developed resources like the one you see on this slide, the XR Playbook, which really takes a clinician through building out an XR program in the VA specifically. And we have created a public-facing version of this that you could have access to. But it really talks about what is XR? How can you get connected with the XR network? How do you identify champions? How do you build out that program? How do you procure or collaborate or get donations? Those SOPs that I mentioned, training, biomed, IT security, all of those various things that go into building out a program so that they're not having to recreate the wheel. We also have an intro guide to XR hardware and software that really talks to what exists on the market today, what is the VA already using, what patient populations is it appropriate for, what are the costs associated with it, so that our clinicians aren't having to do that market research all on their own. We really help bring that to them. In addition to SOP templates, cleaning procedure templates, documentation templates, so really supporting our staff in being able to integrate this from the get-go. That is a huge piece of why we've been able to scale it already the way that we have. And another piece of that is, and if you've never heard of the Diffusion Marketplace, you should absolutely look up VA Diffusion Marketplace. This is a place where you can see various innovations that are happening within the VA. But we also now have an XR Network community page within the Diffusion Marketplace where you can see what's happening within the XR network. So events, publications, innovations that we're going to be constantly adding to, as well as some of those public-facing documents that I mentioned, like the XR Playbook and the intro guide. And next slide, please. And so this is a slide just about what can you do, no matter what area you come from, whether you work in healthcare, government, you're a patient, industry, academia, researchers, what can you do? Because this is really about involving all of the stakeholders for immersive technology in healthcare. So government continuing to lead the way for clinical implementation, determining value, key outcomes, policies to help aid diffusion, whether that's in the VA or outside of it. Healthcare organizations really lending their ear and their voice to those conversations and building out pathways and what are the needs, what are the solutions that we need. Patients, you know, we need their feedback as well. What are their needs, their desires? What do we have already that works for them and what could we provide to them to improve that? Industry, making sure that you're actually collaborating with healthcare and development of solutions, and not just assuming you know what might be needed in healthcare. So we want to continue to work together to build that out. And then, of course, academia and researchers partnering with government, healthcare, industry to determine what knowledge gaps exist, and supporting clinicians in gathering and analyzing data and aid in testing and validating that what is on the market and what is yet to come.
So importantly, what we've learned also is the importance of, we can talk about, and any of you guys who are already familiar with virtual reality, augmented reality, extended reality, immersive technology, whatever you want to call it, is that the experience is critical. And we feel the same way. So we're starting to really lean into the heads and headsets approach, where I always have a headset with me. So if I were to encounter in any moment VA leadership, a veteran, a person on the street who has no idea what VR is, you have that opportunity to show why it's meaningful and impactful. Some of the ways we're doing that this past summer for the first time, and I need to do a little asterisk here because we didn't include our usual slide, VA does not endorse any particular product or company. So just to be clear, these are not endorsements. Any of the companies we have mentioned on this call, we are grateful to work with, and also look forward to hearing from more of you and working together as well. But we don't endorse any company or products. But this past summer in June at the National Simulation Center that VA has in Orlando, we invited 10 vendors, people who are already working with VA, where we were already implementing their work, and also VA leaders. So top level people who likely have never put a headset on, and frontline staff to come and talk about their projects. And what we saw was an incredible groundswell of interest because people were able to experience this for themselves. We weren't just talking about it. So that was able to move us forward even further. And at this event, one of the things we heard from a veteran panel, a group of veterans that were just there talking about why virtual reality matters and why it should be used in their healthcare, a veteran said, why don't we do these events for veterans? So we took that feedback, and in December, we did our first ever veteran experience, or VXR, and we do plan to do these roughly quarterly around the country over the next year and then see how that goes. But we also gathered some feedback from veterans at this first event in December and said, you know, how many of you have ever used virtual reality before? Only 56% had. We asked them, is it easy to use? Is it hard to use? 90% said it was easy to use or very easy to use. The average rating of 1 being terrible and 10 being life-changing, the average response was an 8.3 for their experience with virtual reality. And 95% said they both wanted to use it more in their healthcare journey at the hospital and in clinic, and also at home. So that's the kind of feedback that we need. It's all we need to know to continue to advocate for this. So these are some of the pictures so that you can see it was a great fun day, the veteran experience. We had a great time. Look forward to doing it more and more. And if there's ways that we can support you guys in the same type of events, we're happy to do it. I'll take it to this questions, emails, LinkedIn. You can find us. We are shamelessly easy to find, and also don't hesitate to reach out to us at vaimmersive@va.gov. And I will hand it back to the wonderful and accomplished Dr. Persky.
I was making sure you were going to say me at the end of that. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that presentation. I want to encourage our viewers today to please put any questions you may have in the Q&A box. We are monitoring the box, and that's where we will be getting our questions from. And as you are entering those questions, I have a few that I would love to start with. You know, Anne gave a little bit of data at the end about some of the responses of the veterans to the new events that you're hosting. You know, I'm wondering if you have any sort of stories or exemplars of patient clinician responses to XR that, you know, have sort of illustrated how valuable this tech has been in the VA.
Do you want me to take
put you on the spot?
I can definitely speak to that a little bit. And of course, you know, if we'd had more time today, I would have shared all kinds of data and patient outcomes that we're already collecting within the VA. I think probably the easiest one for me to speak to is my own work with virtual reality in patients, just as an example of some of the data that we've been collecting. So I started use with patients, you know, started that project back in 2017. at one VA. And at that one VA, we've now completed over 500 sessions with patients. And the primary indications for use have been, pain, both chronic and acute, anxiety, enhancing relaxation, easing boredom, and also impacting potentially negative behavior patterns, especially in the cognitively impaired. So looking at that, we've seen reduction in pain, like 69% of those had a significant reduction in pain following or during a single session. And that's both for acute and chronic, which with our patient population, most of them have some level of chronic pain. So if they have surgery, then it just becomes acute on chronic pain. And then for anxiety, we've seen a 94% of those patients having a significant decrease in anxiety, 93% becoming more rested and relaxed after a single session, 96% with just a dissipation of boredom, which if you're in a long-term care facility or stuck on an inpatient hospital ward, we know that that can be an issue too, stuck in one of those beds. And then overall improved behavior. So increasing calm and cooperative behavior, 93% of patients that were agitated, restless, tearful, sad prior to a session had an improvement in those behaviors with just a single session. So that's just one example. And, as I said, we have so many, we have VR in 160 plus medical centers. So the data that's being collected is truly powerful.
Thank you. And I do note that a question was asked about publishing of the data and, what has been done there. And I see Anne is typing an answer. It seems to be probably the right way to respond to that. But if you have anything to add there, I'm sure you have so much time to write these things up on top of everything else that you're doing.
Nailed it. So that's been one of our greatest challenges is one thing is important to us is that we want to continue to contribute to the broader community. So the data that I shared with you about the veteran experience, that happened on December 15th. I literally gathered that data and calculated it at the end of last week. So that has not been published, but I did want to share it quickly because I think it's an important piece of the puzzle that shows that we're not doing this because it's trendy or not just because it's fun, but because our veterans and clinicians are actually asking for it. And that's really important in the healthcare process, is that engagement and access piece of the puzzle. VA has published some data. We have several researchers across the organization who are doing their own projects and formal research and are then publishing. Caitlin has also published, and Caitlin, if you want to talk a little bit about that as well, but there are certainly VR publications from VA, and we'd be happy to share those.
Yeah, I have a couple of publications out there, so you're welcome to search my name and publications, and I'm sure you'd be able to find those. The primary one in Frontiers in VR focused on pain and anxiety in veteran populations and the outcomes of some initial clinical implementation in that particular category. So definitely check that out. And we've had several other VA clinicians that have been published related to their XR use. So definitely search those out. And if you are looking for particular names or use cases, you're welcome to reach out to us and we can share more information.
Great. And the most popular question by far is getting access to the playbook. So do you want to talk a moment or tell folks where they can find that?
Oh, do you want me to respond to that? I was typing in the chat at the same time. I'm doing this is our live, by the way, is being in multiple places at one time. So absolutely, you can reach out to that email address, vaimmersive@va.gov, and we can send that to you as well. Our office is working on a website that should go live in the spring, and we'll have more information that you can quickly grab there. But for now, you can just reach out to us directly and we'll send those out to you.
Excellent, thank you. So let's see, there are a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to take moderator privilege and ask another one of my own. So we've talked about this in other venues, but I know that a lot of times as you're expanding across a lot of sites, often the folks you're able to reach first are sort of the early adopters or people who are very open to trying something new like this. Are there ways that you've discovered or things you're interested in trying to see how you may be able to reach, and maybe you already have, and you can speak to that, but to reach people who aren't sort of first in line to say, you know, I want to try, you know, a new tech gadget to help with my healthcare.
I think one of the ways that we're doing that is through events where we invite veterans to come or we go to them. That's one of our goals going forward over the next year, is to engage with the people who wouldn't otherwise naturally find virtual reality. Because what we're finding consistently, and I had this conversation this morning, is, you know, higher up in the organization, even people say, okay, great, cool, fun, sounds like a wonderful idea, but, you know, not for me. And they put a headset on, and all of a sudden you see the light bulb go off. And now we have multiple doctors and strategic MDs, right? That's one of the important pieces of the puzzle that we can talk about. It doesn't require an MD, but we have an MD that's in a strategic leadership position that is saying, I can see why and how this works. That has helped us get it more broadly out into our community of veterans. And one of the ways that we want to continue to do that is through those veteran experience projects. And Caitlin can tell you, I think she talked specifically to the wife of one of the veterans that came to that event, who I think honestly didn't want to come, and she talked him into it. But so much of it is continuing to get the word out there and tell the stories of the people who said, I didn't want to come, I didn't think it would work, I thought, and really sort of dispel some of those assumptions and myths about virtual reality in general.
Wonderful, thank you. Going to one of the questions that's come in, you know, this relates to access potentially remotely. So it's, you know, it sounds like a lot of what happens is happening in clinic, but there are questions about progress on sort of remote access. If you've been able to implement that, do you have any sort of lessons learned? This question asker, and I also have personal experience suggesting that, you know, that process can be pretty painful, depending on, you know, sort of who's handling it, logistics, you know, creation of downtime and such. So perhaps an update on that arena.
I know Caitlin has some personal experience with this. I can speak from the national perspective as well. So one of the things that we have learned is that from our organization's perspective, a headset is very different from a tablet or a phone. So we send tablets and phones out to veterans all the time. We tried to then adapt that policy and just use it for headsets, and they didn't go for it. They didn't bite. So it's been a very project by project process, finding individual champions at sites who are willing to go first and try it, not just from the clinician perspective. That's of course critical and foundational, but from that logistics side, for us, there's a prosthetic service that can be helpful, but they at times say this is not something that we should own or be responsible for. So then it's finding another person along the pathway that could help get the devices into the hands of veterans. So our goal right now is we're evaluating this a few different ways. One, what does it look like for us to pay the company to just handle everything? So there's a demo device at the facility and the company handles everything else. All we have to do is complete a form, they take it and run with it, versus we have all the devices at the facility, the patient takes it home with them, and then either brings it back or it becomes theirs. Those are some of the things we're currently testing, and hopefully in the next year we'll be able to say, my suspicion is the answer will be, it's going to be a little bit of all of those, but hopefully we'll have a more streamlined process that we can give a step-to-step guide and share that more publicly. But Caitlin, I know you've had some very specific experience with that as well.
Yeah, there's just a lot of nuances to trying to get the technology into patient homes. You know, a lot of things to consider related to privacy and information security, the logistics of actually shipping it to them or handing it to them in clinic, making sure that they, you know, have the training that they need to be able to use independently in their homes. But I think, you know, the prospect of being able to send devices home with patients, whether that's actually issuing that device to them and letting them own it, or even loaning it out to them has so much potential for, contributing to continuity of care, contributing to patients actually engaging with their own healthcare and taking some ownership of that, as well as making the work of therapies more engaging and interesting and exciting to the patient. And especially as we get more and more of the younger generation of veterans kind of joining VA healthcare, that's also going to be an expectation. In the private sector, we know that, healthcare is becoming more and more, convenient, telehealth appointments, doctors, going to actual homes rather than going into a healthcare facility. So in the VA, we're looking at, how can we leverage technology like immersive technology in improving our care delivery and bringing care to our patients. And there's going to be a lot of barriers to overcome, but it's not a task that we are shying away from at all.
Great. So there have been a bunch of requests about getting in contact. If it's convenient, maybe you could put the the last slide up again with the contact information, because I believe this is where folks would reach out for access to the playbook or to get in touch about specific questions related to collaboration and such. And while that is happening, kind of a more open-ended question that relates to something I've also kind of been wondering. So there's a question about emerging tech trends, the things that you're excited about that you see coming down the pike. And I'm gonna sort of combine that with a question about, things that maybe clinicians or veterans are asking for. Are there technologies or applications or things that you're excited to start to integrate, and or where you think that there may be a lot of promise?
Yeah, I think some of the things that I am particularly excited about is the ability of this technology to augment our clinical staff. So much of the work that you're doing, Susan, I think, of course, we have to prove that it works and that we're making sure that the quality of care doesn't decline. But I think it's really important in a situation where we have immense shortage of healthcare providers. If there's a way with a modality that is engaging and effective, increase access to care, then we are effectively expanding the footprint of the healthcare system. And I think, and Caitlin mentioned this earlier, I think so much of the world now comes to us, and we have to think about healthcare in that same way. And I think this technology is really the inflection point of beginning to do more and more of that.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. The getting devices into patient hands, into their homes is a big exciting piece of that, I think, but also the technology itself, just the way it's been evolving so rapidly. I think that's going to be really exciting too, with just the new capabilities for body tracking, with biomarkers, embedding that in there. So we're getting some other meaningful data beyond, patient generated, health data and patient reported outcomes. Like, let's look at, how is this impacting their actual bodies as they're going through this? So I think some of that is going to be very exciting as well.
And I think that dovetails with another question that came in. As we've seen kind of throughout the ecosystem, I would say a lot of the focus right now is on virtual reality. And the question really is if you can speak to, potential uses for augmented reality, and related technologies. I know you guys talk about immersive broadly, but maybe talking about sort of the scope in terms of the different, media devices that are used.
Yeah, I think we're all learning. I think virtual reality has grown quickly from the perspective of, companies have helped by making consumer devices, right? And so we often even see, there was a story going around internally this morning about virtual reality for dialysis and the number of patients that then go home and purchase their own devices. That has certainly made virtual reality more accessible than augmented reality just to contrast the two. But we are trying to take the broader approach, because what we realize is if we hang our hat on one technology, the next day there's going to be something new and different and potentially better. And so we want to think more about the concept of immersive experiences and not just a particular head-mounted display or handheld display or things like that. We are seeing more augmented reality use in the training and education space than in the patient facing realm. That could change over the next few years, but that's really how we're seeing it sort of naturally find its path right now.
Wonderful. More questions coming in about, you know, the ability to sort of have an introduction, show, you know, folks at the VA some of the applications that are out there. Would those folks use the contact information up there now, or is there a different channel for that?
Yes, so it depends on why you want to reach out to us. So if you want the playbook, just reach out to us directly. Say, hey, I would like a copy of the playbook. We'll respond and get that to you. If you would like to do a demo or share information about your company or work that you're doing, send that to that same email address, but please include a 1-pager or a 2 to 3 sentence description of what you're doing and why you think it's unique and valuable to a veteran population. As you can imagine, we do get these emails a lot, and so we try to give them the time that they deserve and then give you the response. Full disclosure, we currently are scheduling demos in March and April, so be patient with us as we're trying to do our due diligence and make sure that people are aware of opportunities and things like that. I know there's been some questions about business models as far as like, do rentals work and things like that. Right now, we are open to any business model that VA is able to engage in. We don't yet know which one is the best model. And sometimes it's site by site, and sometimes it matters if it's coming from a higher level, like a national office can purchase things differently than a facility can. So to sort of respond to that question without a entirely specific answer, but I think that will become more clear going forward. But just going back to, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And if you're reaching out to do a demo or share something about your company, include that 1-pager or 2 to 3 sentences would be helpful.
Great. So along a different line, there is a question about patients who may have vision or auditory limitations. I mean, obviously, since we're treating folks, you know, who have health conditions, you know, what has the VA and your work found in terms of adapting, you know, equipment, experiences, and so on to be able to serve a greater number of folks?
I love this question. And Caitlin's heard me say this a few times. There's an office in the VA that I would have never thought for us to go to talk about virtual reality, and that's the low vision rehab group. And they actually came to us and said, how can we use virtual reality to help with our patients? And there has been early adoption from that office. Actually, at the veteran experience, one of the first patients to come through was a low vision patient. And so we were able to, with him, evaluate different headsets and platforms to determine what was helpful, what was accessible for him, and how we might be able to make it more accessible. For example, when there was some text on the screen at one point, but there was also an audio overlay. So he was able to hear the question, but the ability to zoom things in sometimes or move things further out, that's going to be critical going forward to continue to expand people's ability to access this. Caitlin, I don't know I know you've had some more experiences with that as well.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot that can be said about, you know, things that we've run into with the technical challenges and everything else that have, you know, made adoption easier to begin with. You know, the fact that a lot of the devices we've used within the VA that are veteran facing have not needed Wi-Fi. They're standalone systems that don't need that to function. It comes to us, software already on the headset, ready to go. Makes it much easier to clinically implement. Without having to wait on like OINT approvals for actual integration into a network. And so that's a big piece of it too. And when I first started using virtual reality with patients, you know, that was something I was avoiding that intentionally because my goal was to get headsets on patients. Let's see the value. You know, I wasn't as caring of like the rigor of collecting data even. I just wanted to improve the patient experience. And, you know, I think that's the mindset a lot of our clinicians are coming from. This is a problem I see. How can I solve it using immersive technology? Because that is the key for me, you know, like that is the key. This is what I want to accomplish, is to improve veteran care. And if that also means that we get to collect some great data and build out the business case for why that is impactful and how it's impacting the entire organization, then fantastic. But if we can change the experience, change the life of a single veteran, then that's what we're here for. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the VA, is that gets to be our focus.
All right, wonderful. And I see there was a question about accessing the video. I think Steve will answer that later, but I also believe that the videos are posted on the website for the organization afterwards. Fantastic. We are really burning through the questions. So if folks have more, this is an excellent opportunity. Oh, and I see Steve has answered the question about the recording. So it will be posted to the MedVR.io website within a week. So you will be able to access it there. I am sort of wondering about your experience. I mean, this has been a really unique role that the two of you have been able to play in this unfolding. And, you know, what has surprised you, or what have you learned really quickly? Sort of what has the experience been for you of leading this process that really nobody has ever, you know, really done before? You know, what you guys have created is amazing. So can you talk about that a little bit from your own personal perspective?
Caitlin, go first.
Well, I can tell you it's been a wild ride. I never expected as a bedside nurse to be in the position that I'm in now. But, you know, looking back on it, it kind of makes sense for the way my life has gone and my experiences prior to this. But, you know, it's amazing to watch a veteran use virtual reality for the first time. And that's what drives me every single day, is the experiences that I've had watching a patient who was writhing in pain without comfort, meds not helping it, all of a sudden literally falling asleep with a headset on because they all of a sudden were so relaxed and without pain that they were able to do so. And just experiences like that across the board. You know, it's not without its work, of course, and Anne and I have put in countless hours solving the problems of integrating, you know, XR into healthcare. But it's also been like incredibly meaningful to be able to make this kind of impact and to really work at changing the way any healthcare system could potentially integrate this technology. So our goal is not only to help our veterans and to help VHA, but also hopefully pave the way for others to be able to do so as well. And you know, it's going to be a constant ongoing process, as we know, as technology changes, as new barriers come up. But I think that if we're able to kind of tackle those and build out the tools necessary, to build out the pathways necessary, it's going to be limitless, the areas that we can expand into.
I think one of the most fun things has been, I mean, Susan, you started your program in 2006. You know, I mean, we are babies in this field. Really, I mean, you know, Caitlin's project started in 2017. There were some projects going 2 years before that, sort of. You know, we all, I think, are aware of work by, you know, Dr. Walter Greenleaf, Dr. Skip Rizzo, people that have been doing this for decades. And I think one of the things that's been honestly the most fun and most exciting is, one, the community approach of groups like this, the MedVR community, the International Virtual Reality and Healthcare Association community, really coming together to try to solve this and grow this as a group. I think we in VA are certainly standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, this was not our idea. You know, this has just been going for a long time. We just get to come in this moment and hopefully continue to validate and advocate for the work that has been growing over decades, and to see, to combine the potential that we have as VA and something I really believe in, which is why I love working for VA, is we have that ability of being both a payer provider. We can take some risks that other healthcare organizations can't take. We also have the ability to scale things. And so we can say, not only does it work in this setting with these people at this place, but also in this completely different location, this completely different demographic. And not everybody has that ability, but I would love to see VA play that role in this community continuing going forward. Let us test it. Let us take the risks and learn and share, because we do want to be transparent as we learn. This hasn't been, all rainbows and cupcakes, but it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of hard work, but I still think even having it at such scale with so many use cases, so many patients and staff, I still think we're just getting started. And it's going to continue to take this kind of community approach to figure out what problems we need to solve and how it makes sense to solve them with this technology. And also, Susan, we've talked about this a lot, where we say, okay, great, that problem needs to be solved. Virtual reality is not the solution for that one. To be able to say it's not everything, it's just a really important thing. And so I'm looking forward to doing that going forward.
That is awesome. That is, absolutely been something I have also treasured about this community. It's just full of really great, generous, smart people who want to solve problems, which is fantastic. You actually set up my next question really well, which is that, VHA is very unique. There are a lot of features about it that I think makes it a perfect sort of proving ground for a lot of the work you guys are doing. In thinking about who wants to become the next VHA and bring some of these things to scale, what parts of your operation do you think are relevant for sort of more traditional healthcare system operations versus what do you think is really unique to VHA?
That's a great question. My answer is probably not a sexy one, which is I think in a healthcare system in general, repeatable processes are really critical.
Mm-hmm.
And so figuring out how to get from interest to purchase or interest to deployed research project or interest to quality improvement pilot, those steps to the puzzle can be the straw that breaks the camel's back if it's not clear for frontline staff or clinicians. And then I think the other thing that we are really seeing right now is the importance of aligning with your leadership's priorities and initiatives. So for us, we're a little bit vulnerable because our leadership can change with an administration change, as can our priorities. But, I say this all the time, our baby's the cutest. Like, we really do think that immersive technology can align to a lot of different priorities of a lot of different leaders. But I think being able to articulate that to your leadership is more important than you might think it is, because you want them to look to you and come to you and say, I have a problem. Do you think this could help solve it?
I think, another piece of that too, that I think is translatable to other healthcare organizations, and I've consulted with some other healthcare organizations about just that, is, you're going to need clinician engagement and champions no matter what healthcare organization, and including them in the development of pilots, clinical implementations, research studies is absolutely key to include them in that process, as well as, the development of resources. So in order to support integration of XR in healthcare, you need to provide clinical resources to enable that to occur, and hopefully in a standardized manner. So those SOPs, how do you want them to document it? What is the infection control procedure going to look like? And the more that we can help, not just the VA, but other outside entities to not have to recreate that wheel entirely, I think the better, so that we're all looking at this kind of through the same lens. And then another thing that we've been doing as well that I think other healthcare organizations could adopt is, offering a lot of support sessions. So if we have a pilot going on, we have office hours for that pilot that happen every 2 weeks. They can come in, they can ask questions, share barriers, successes. We're always there to support them, especially at the beginning of a pilot. We use Microsoft Teams. We have a channel for every single pilot that we have. So all the clinicians involved in that pilot can share questions amongst themselves. We can share resources, how-to guides, all of the things that they would need to know on a regular basis so that they have easy access to it at all times, as well as that being a place where they can also collect or aggregate data that they're collecting in the electronic health record templates and sharing that amongst pilot participants. You know, there's things like that that can be used all across the healthcare organizations and not just within the VA.
That's great. That's a whole lot of great advice all rolled up in there. And you know that I love the data aggregation part. So thanks for fitting that in.
Yes.
There's also been some good, this idea that our baby is the cutest also seems to be resonating. And I think our baby is the cutest. I love it. So we are coming up at the top of the hour here. So I'm going to go ahead and send it back over to Steve to close us out. Steve, you're muted. Check off on my bingo card.
At the beginning and at the end, yes. I'd like to thank our speakers from the VA, Dr. Bailey and Caitlin Rawlins. It's a wonderful experience that they've had, a wonderful learning experience that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. And I often ponder, you know, how you scale new technologies. And one of the things that came out of this is repeatable process. And if there's any place where you'll get repeatable process is in the military, because that's every single day of every single person's job is to make it repeatable. So thank you. That was really valuable. And Dr. Persky, thank you so much for being a domain expert moderator. I think it definitely improved the talk, and hope to work with you again in the future. Just a quick note. Next week, Wednesday, same time, same place, we have a talk with two doctors who code AR and VR. This is super interesting because if I found one challenge to building successful medical XR products, it is the communications between the expert user and the development team. And when you have the expert user in this case who can articulate their needs in code and communicate with the development team, it really changes the effectiveness. I would call them both unicorns, and it will be led by Bernard Francois, who is an expert at prototyping. So he'll have wonderful questions to ask. So we look forward to seeing you there. This talk will be up in about a week on our website. Take a look. There are awful lot of talks that that have taken place over the last 18 months or so by experts in the field that ranging from mental health to surgery. And I think we have probably some of the most, I think out of the list of most cited researchers, I think we probably have 2/3 of them having given talks. So it's a good place to learn. So thank you, everyone, and see you next week.